everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're back, if you are new, welcome to my channel. I'm Shayna and I have an update on the Orrin and Orson missing persons case for you all today. Just my usual disclaimer, this is all information that I have found online that I've compiled into a video for educational and entertainment purposes. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this case, I do have another video of it on my channel that gives the whole background story and kind of breaks down everything that happened. So I do recommend going to check that video out prior to watching this one if you are unfamiliar with the story of what happened to Orrin and Orson. But just a brief synopsis. Orrin and Orson West are two boys, 3 and 4 years old, who went missing from their California City home that they lived at with their adoptive parents back in December of 2020. California City Police Chief John Walker has done a series of press conferences and interviews to keep the public informed on this investigation. It is still an open investigation. The children have not been found, so it's been ongoing for a couple months now. And Perla Shaheen, who is from KGET 17, did another interview with him just within the last week that I kind of wanted to break down and share with you all. It was very interesting, some of the answers that we got from Chief Walker, and just a little bit more information than what we had before. So thank you so much for joining me today, and let's get started. Now, the first thing that Perla asks Chief Walker is the boys alive? Are the boys alive? And he says that he has no reason to believe that they are not. So based on the investigation that they've been doing, they have no evidence to show that the boys are not currently alive. He does believe that the boys were taken from their home or from the neighborhood with some sort of assistance. He does talk about how, based on his experience, a 3 and 4 year old boy wouldn't be able to go much further than 20 or 30 yards before getting exhausted. That, combined with the fact that it was cold outside, the two of them being on foot and just running away, is unlikely without the help of some other third party. So he isn't convinced necessarily that they are not alive, but he does think that foul play was involved. And foul play being defined as any person who helped to take the boys away from their parents and are refusing to disclose their location. So he doesn't define foul play as bodily harm, as abuse, as injury, as death, but he does define foul play as someone being involved in this who shouldn't be. And he does think that that is exactly what happened to Orrin and Orson. He does not think that they just left on their own accord. The next question that Perla asks Chief Walker is, are there any persons of interest in this case? And he says that there are dozens. He says that there are dozens of persons of interest. And while there are no identified suspects at this time, they are interviewing many people who could possibly be involved in this case. He does go on to confirm, what we generally know to be standard procedure in missing persons cases, that they will typically interview the family first. So they basically start from the inside out. And he has said that they have started from the inside out. They have interviewed and looked into the family, and now they are moving out and branching outwards. But he has said that they have interrogated, I guess you can say. He didn't use that word, but he did say that they have interviewed the adoptive parents as well as the siblings of Orrin and Orson, which is interesting that he was able to release that information, but nevertheless he did. He did also say that they are still following up on all leads. So this case is not by any means even close to being considered a cold case. He also does call the term cold case kind of an internet term. He doesn't really believe that cases go cold because 99% of the time, even after cases have long passed, interviews and interrogations and investigations are still being done into missing persons cases. So he did say that this case is far from being considered what the internet would deem to be a cold case. And he did mention that the FBI, the Kern County Sheriff Office, the Bakersfield Police Department, as well as California City Police Department are all still working diligently in this case, and they have not by any means given up, and they are still taking on all, calls, all leads, anyone who can specifically give any information they are following up on very diligently. Now, something that she touched on, which I'm glad that she did, was regarding how the canines who initially came in to search for the boy's scent found Orrin and Orson's scent inside the house, but not outside the house. This kind of causes an issue a little bit because Trezell did say that the boys were playing outside the house. They were playing in the backyard before they went missing. And since the canines didn't find the boys' scent outside, the public were basically saying, well, Trezell is lying. It's impossible that the boys were possibly playing outside. The police chief did say that they have no reason to believe that even though the canines didn't find the scent outside the house, they have no reason to believe that they weren't outside necessarily. And just because the scent was only found inside the house does not indicate that the boys are still inside the house. So some people are under the impression that maybe the boys are still inside the house, that they have been killed, and that they are somehow hidden in the walls, in the floors, that there are hidden rooms in the house or an extra basement. And Chief John Walker shut this down. He said that there is absolutely no way. They have searched inside, outside, underneath every nook and cranny of this house that is possible. And there is absolutely no way that Orrin and Orson are still inside this house. The fact that the dogs picked up on their scent is simply because they live there, the belongings were there, their family lives there who has also touched their things. So that's what they chalk it up to. They don't chalk it up to the boys still being inside the house. Chief Walker was able to talk about some of the sophisticated technology that they've used in this investigation, which was very interesting. He was able to touch on the fact that they did deploy helicopters that included some technology like a scope that picks up on body heat in the nighttime. He did say that the night that they were reported missing, this technology was deployed and they searched a 5-mile radius. Basically what the scope does, he called it a flare. Basically what it does is the helicopter flies over a body of land, and this flare is able to pick up on the average human body temperature, which is at or about 98 degrees. And when this happens, basically it shows up on their monitor like a beam of light, even in the nighttime. He said that they deployed this for 5 miles. There's no way that 2 kids under the age of 5 years old will be able to get more than 5 miles within a couple hours time span. There's absolutely no way that that would be possible. But in addition to the flare, they also did use the night sun, which is, I didn't know that's what it was called, which is kind of cool. It's basically that huge light that comes down from a helicopter when they're doing searches of large land areas. So the night sun and the flare were both used the night that Orrin and Orson went missing, which helps to confirm that they were probably taken by someone. Something that was really causing an uproar in this case is that when Chief John Walker did one of his initial interviews, he did mention that after interviewing the neighbors did report that they had not seen any boys that looked to be 3 or 4 years or about that age at the home of Jacqueline and Trezell. What are the chances that neighbors are not going to see 2, 3, and 4-year-old boys in the span of 3 months if they had actually been living there? So people were taking this information, kind of running with it and saying, well, maybe the boys never made it to California City. Maybe they were killed where they used to live and then they never actually came to California City, or maybe they were killed in California City long before Trezell even reported them missing. But he did go back and backtrack on the statement, and he said that after doing more interviews, he wanted to amend this and correct himself and say that other neighbors did report that they had seen Orrin and Orson, or 2 boys that looked to be about that age. He also touched on the fact that it's not unlikely that neighbors wouldn't see the 2 boys because the area that they lived, there were empty lots between the homes. It's kind of a spread out area. COVID is also, a contributing factor to why people aren't going outside as much. So he kind of wanted to put to bed the rumors about people not seeing the boys, even though they weren't really rumors because they came directly from him. He basically just wanted to kind of calm the chatter that was coming from what he had said, because it was doing a lot of harm to Trezell and Jacqueline. People really feel like the 2 of them are guilty in this case, and that did not help. Perla then kind of moved on to some questions about the family being interviewed, when they were interviewed, how many times they were interviewed, how recently they were interviewed. And Chief John Walker did say that Trezell and Jacqueline were interviewed about a few weeks ago. Again, this interview that I'm talking about right now was done within the last week, so that means that they probably were interrogated or interviewed within the last month. He did also confirm that the 4 siblings were interviewed as well. And he mentions that the last known people to see Orrin and Orson were Jacqueline and Trezell. Outside of them two, the other person to see the two boys recently was their grandmother. He also did say that everyone is still very much cooperating with the investigation, and that as far as he's aware, no one has retained a lawyer, which of course does kind of shine in the favor of Jacqueline and Trezell. That helps their case and makes them look a little bit better. Historically, in these cases, when a family member or someone who's close to the investigation retains a lawyer, the public immediately jumps on that and runs with it, because it makes the person involved, unfortunately, look very suspicious and very guilty, even though honestly in these situations you probably should get a lawyer regardless, because they can take anything that you say and use it against you. You know, as far as public opinion goes, it is in their favor that Chief John Walker did not say that they retained a lawyer, so that is some more information, which take with that what you will. Now, I really like the direction that she takes the interview after this point, because she starts asking some hard questions that are kind of uncomfortable, but people want the answers to. She goes in the direction of talking about the fact that Jacqueline and Trezell have not been instructed by police to avoid communication or avoid reporting to the media. So she asks him, and he says no, they have not been instructed not to communicate with the media or with the public. And she kind of goes into the fact that Jacqueline and Trezell have not released any more up-to-date photos of Orrin and Orson. Typically in missing persons cases, you want to have as many photos of the missing person as possible, so that way members of the public, if they do come across this missing person or someone that they think may look like this missing person, they have more photos to go off of in their mind, so they're more confident when reporting back to police that they've seen this person. But Jacqueline and Trezell have not released any more photos except for the couple that we already have, which we don't know if they're out of date. We don't know if they're older photos. We don't know if Orrin and Orson still look exactly like those photos. So it's really interesting. Now, kind of in their defense, Chief John Walker did say that the two phones of Jacqueline and Trezell were confiscated by police as part of the evidence in the investigation, and they were never returned to Jacqueline and Trezell. So he says that the two of them, as far as he knows, have new phones now, and that basically confirmed that the police still had their original cell phones. Which, okay, maybe they don't have access to photos because they only had photos on their phone that the police now have. But what are the chances that no one in the family has any other photos of Orrin and Orson? 4 older siblings, a grandmother, family friends, like no one else has any updated photos of these two boys. I find it very unlikely. And it's not helping Jacqueline and Trezell's case that they aren't being more forthcoming, that they aren't talking to the media more, that they aren't being more just out there trying to raise awareness about Orrin and Orson's disappearance. It's just very interesting. It's kind of suspicious. Perla also asks about the neighbors in the doorbell cameras. So 2 of the neighbors that live very close to Jacqueline and Trezell's home have cameras on their house that basically point directly to where Orrin and Orson lived. And Perla asks Chief John Walker if the police have found any video footage of the boys being at the home or the night that they went missing, and he refuses to comment on this. He basically says that he can't release that information. But some of you may remember AV Watchman, who is a person on YouTube, did get some of the footage from the neighbors, and on that footage, Orrin and Orson are not seen the night that they disappeared. They are not seen the night that Jacqueline said that they all went to the mall with all the kids. They aren't seen on the footage. So it's not surprising that the chief can't release this information, but it is concerning because why weren't they seen the night that they disappeared? That is still kind of the biggest head scratcher. That's kind of the biggest suspicious looking part of this case. And it was unfortunate that he wasn't able to give more information, but it's also not surprising. Perla also does put the pressure on him about the 911 call. So police have not released the 911 call that Trezell allegedly made the night that he discovered that the boys were missing. And she kind of questions him about this. And he says that that will not be released. It has not been released thus far because it's part of an active investigation. And she kind of pushes back a little bit. You know, she is a journalist, she is a reporter. And she says to him, look, I've gotten 911 calls from other investigations that were ongoing, that were still open. So she kind of throws that one at him and he shuts it down. He gets defensive. He's like, we're not releasing that information. So so I thought that was interesting. There's nothing we can really do about that. Maybe there's something on that phone call that police are using to build a case against Trezell and Jacqueline. We really have no idea, but it's just interesting. The last thing that Perla asks the chief is how the public can help in the search for Orrin and Orson. And I found it interesting what his answer was. So his answer wasn't call in with leads, if you know something, say something. His answer wasn't anything like that. What the chief basically said was refrain from calling with criticisms of the investigation. So he did mention that basically a lot of people have been calling in with leads, but a lot of people have also been calling in just to kind of voice their grievances and their issues with how the police have conducted the investigation thus far. He does mention that his staff is very friendly and that they'll take the time to listen to what the public has to say and listen to their opinions. But for people who are strictly calling in to criticize what the investigators have done up until this point, it does take time away from them actively searching for Orrin and Orson, which does make sense. I just thought it was interesting that that was his answer when she asked him what the most important thing the public can do is right now. That implies to me that they've gotten an overwhelming number of people calling in complaining about how the investigation is going. And I'm willing to bet my bottom dollar that it's people who are calling in who are basically saying Jacqueline and Trezell are clearly guilty. Why haven't you pressed charges against them? I'm willing to bet that that's exactly what people have to say, because in this situation, they do look very guilty. It's not a good look for the parents, but he basically was like, look, I understand people are upset, but please, if you're calling in, call with leads, call with information, call with things that can help us find the boys, because that's the best thing to do. The reward for anyone who is able to provide any information that leads to the discovery of the boys is now $120,000. It has gone up quite a bit. If you know any information, I will put the numbers for the resources in the description box below that you can contact to provide any information regarding the whereabouts of Orrin and Orson. Please keep your eyes peeled. I know that this happened all the way in California, but no matter where you live, the two boys could be anywhere. So if you see something, please say something. These are two innocent little boys who we hope are able to be brought home safely sooner than later. This is a very sad case, and I'm hoping that it comes to a conclusion, basically with the safe return of Orrin and Orson back to their adoptive parents. But that is all that I have for you today. This is a very sad case. It weighs heavy on me because anything involving children is just sad, especially when there's just so many unanswered questions. I will, definitely bring any other information that I do learn about this case to you all. But thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Oh, I forgot to say, if you made it this far, you are loyal. You really are. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.